What had touched my consciousness during the station's destruction hadn't chosen me at random. It had recognized an ancient signal. That recognition made me a target. And not just for the Vhaltar. Within humanity itself, factions began to argue over what to do about it. For some, I had to be protected at any cost, becoming a central piece in any negotiation. For others, I was an existential risk. If the Vhaltar needed my presence to validate a judgment, all they had to do was eliminate me to stop the process. What made the situation even more delicate was that no one truly understood what kind of judgment would take place. Nothing guaranteed that my absence wouldn't trigger an even more aggressive response from them. Amid this deadlock, Draven made a decision many would call madness. He chose not to hide who I was from the alien allies on board. Instead, he laid out the facts in a restricted meeting, arguing that any attempt to manipulate the situation alone would only repeat the same mistakes that had nearly destroyed the galaxy in previous wars. It was time to admit the problem was bigger than the human species. Strangely, that brutal honesty opened doors. Some of the alien representatives present, especially those from cultures used to living under the shadow of so-called suprahistorical entities, understood immediately the weight of the host figure. In their traditions, there were always stories of individuals born with unexplained marks, destined to be pivots of inevitable transformations. To them, I was not an accident. I was a sign that an era was changing. That did not make their stance any more altruistic. Each species merely began to calculate, even more carefully, how to use that information to its own advantage. But at least one point had been made clear. Killing the host would be seen by many as terminal insanity. While these debates unfolded in closed rooms, the Vhaltar structure remained motionless, pulsing to its own rhythm. No attack had yet been attempted, though heavily armed fleets now surrounded the system in wide arcs. The balance was fragile. A single rash move from any side would be enough to set the entire system on fire. I could feel the presence all the time. It wasn't constant like pain, it was more like a gaze. Sometimes I could forget it, buried in mechanical tasks or in physical exercises imposed by the medical staff. At other times, it would appear suddenly, as if the attention of something enormous had turned specifically to me for a few seconds. In those moments, thoughts I had not called surfaced at the edge of my awareness. Concepts about symmetry, order, deviation, annoyingly clear ideas about how patterns tended toward chaos, and how certain kinds of chaos could, paradoxically, generate more resilient structures. It was hard to tell what was mine and what was being whispered. At the height of the speculation, the first attack occurred. It didn't come from the Vhaltar. A human faction calling itself the Guardians of Purity decided it could not risk an external judgment over our own species. With a bold maneuver, they moved their fleet to the far side of the system under the pretext of reinforcing the blockade, then launched a massive salvo of high-energy torpedoes at the crystalline structure. The Aegis's sensors recorded the impact in detail. Lances of energy crossed the void and struck the surface of the Colossus. Against any conventional target, that would have produced spectacular explosions, cracks, fragmentation. On the Vhaltar structure, the effect was different. The surface absorbed the blows as if they were rain. The struck areas shone intensely, then returned the light to their surroundings, leaving no permanent marks. No fissures, no material loss, no apparent reaction. For a few seconds, the galaxy held its breath. The response did not take long. Without any visible emission, without detectable heating, without any acceleration of external parts, the structure released a single pulse. Not a beam, not a ray, but a wave. It expanded in all directions, passing through the ships of the Orion fleet, through the alien delegations, through the ancient debris and the asteroid field, until it reached the attacking fleet. The human ship's shields flared, trying to compensate. Engines strained to maneuver. Defensive systems went into a frenzy. None of it mattered. Where the wave touched, the ships stopped functioning as ships. They weren't destroyed. They didn't explode. They were dismantled into concepts. Materials separated into molecular layers, internal fields shut down, structures lost macroscopic cohesion. In seconds, an entire fleet became a controlled dust cloud, gently parked in orbit, as if someone had decided to reorganize the space. There were no screams in the vacuum. There were screams, yes, on every command bridge that watched it happen. No other fleet fired after that, at least not in the hours that followed. At the same time, inside me, something opened once more. The invasive Vhaltar presence I had been feeling in fragments became total. The sensation of being watched gave way to the sensation of being seized, not physically, but at the core of my consciousness. A set of invisible vectors seemed to align toward a specific point in my being, as if they were locking onto a target at the center of a labyrinth. I understood, without anyone explaining, that they were no longer just monitoring. They were calling, and that call was not negotiable. The call intensified. It wasn't sound, it wasn't light, it wasn't touch. It was as if someone had embedded an invisible magnet in the center of my mind, pulling everything I was toward a precise, unavoidable direction. No human language could truly explain it, because it had no shape, no weight, no color. It was pure intent, like an ancient command finally being executed after ages of sleep. At the same time, I felt the aegis stir. The crew sensed that something was wrong, even if they couldn't see what held me. Alarms spread through the corridors, not because of an imminent attack, but because every cognitive monitoring device went wild. Every sensor, every mental radiation gauge, every neural protection field showed impossible values, as if a gigantic entity were passing through the ship's hull without touching it. For the first time, I clearly understood that I was not simply being observed, I was being summoned. The Vhaltar awakening was not a mechanical process, it was a living phenomenon, conscious, oriented toward a singular purpose, and that purpose somehow passed through me. As that truth settled with almost physical weight, the crystalline structure at the center of the system began to change. Until then, it had remained static, like a mountain suspended in the void. Suddenly, its contours vibrated, and its surfaces reorganized with frightening fluidity. It was like watching an organism shift stages, like a chrysalis splitting open to reveal something greater within. The outer layers retracted, opening deep fractures that exposed pulsing inner strata. It wasn't technology in the human sense. There was a mathematical elegance in every movement. Each crystalline plate slid at perfect angles, locking into positions that followed some invisible pattern. It was impossible to say whether this thing was a ship, a temple, an organism, a processor, or all of them at once. Soon, I realized that this reconfiguration was not general, it was directed. The structure seemed to be preparing to receive something. Me. A chill ran down my spine. No courage, no training could withstand the magnitude of that revelation. It didn't matter how many wars I had survived, how many missions, how many deaths I had witnessed. This was beyond the human scale. I was just a tiny piece being pulled toward a cosmic board that existed long before the first organic being ever drew breath. Around me, the Aegis tried to react. I could feel the ship ramping up its defensive systems, raising reinforced shields, rerouting power to critical sectors. It was useless. The entire fleet could have pointed its weapons at that structure, and it wouldn't have mattered. The previous pulse had made that clear. Against something this ancient and vast, human technology was little more than irritating dust. The other fleets in the system, human and alien, also noticed the Colossus's movement. Some pulled back, others stayed perfectly still, afraid to provoke a reaction. A few, driven by their own private desperations, armed their batteries and prepared for a war they couldn't win. The pull inside my mind became unbearable. It felt as if something inside me had been switched on, something not placed there by nature, nor by human design. It was a kind of ancestral antenna, a fragment of hibernating intent that was now awakening. I felt an echo vibrating inside my very DNA, as if every cell were being called by name. In that instant, I knew with absolute certainty that resisting was useless, not out of weakness, but because this summons was not an invitation, it was a function. Space around the structure shifted again. A massive ring opened on its outer surface, like an iris dilating to swallow light. The center of that ring did not reveal any physical interior. It revealed only darkness, so absolute it seemed to devour not just starlight, but perception itself. Staring into that void was like facing the limit of what could be understood. It was like looking at the visible form of an unanswered question. I knew instinctively that this was a portal, not to another place, but to a deeper layer of the Vhaltar consciousness itself. That I was not inviting me in. It was waiting for me. The body reacted before the mind. I started to feel short of breath, not because my oxygen supply was compromised, but because the anxiety was too vast to contain. My hands trembled, my heart raced. A rational part of me screamed to run, to hide, to call for help. But another part, the part the Vhaltar seemed to recognize, moved forward toward the unknown with a naturalness that did not belong to me. The crew noticed I was moving without conscious control. Alarms flared, containment protocols activated. Somewhere in the ship, doors sealed shut, barriers rose, as if any of that could stop what was about to happen. None of it mattered. The energy fields around me began to fluctuate. It was as though my body were emitting some imperceptible radiation, harmless to the eye, devastating to any system trying to restrain me. Mechanical locks disengaged, containment kits failed, energy barriers shut down one by one. It became evident that the ship no longer had jurisdiction over my fate. None of it mattered. The energy fields around me began to fluctuate. It was as though my body were emitting some imperceptible radiation, harmless to the eye, devastating to any system trying to restrain me. Mechanical locks disengaged, containment kits failed, energy barriers shut down one by one. It became evident that the ship no longer had jurisdiction over my fate. None of it mattered. The energy fields around me began to fluctuate. It was as though my body were emitting some imperceptible radiation, harmless to the eye, devastating to any system trying to restrain me. Mechanical locks disengaged, containment kits failed, energy barriers shut down one by one. It became evident that the ship no longer had jurisdiction over my fate. The sensation within my mind grew until it became nearly unbearable. It was like trying to hold a breath underwater in an infinite ocean. I was being pulled by a force I did not understand, yet recognized as inevitable, like a forgotten instrument finally being tuned to play the note it was built for. Amid the chaos, the fleet began to reposition. Nearby ships attempted to intercept my departure. Containment robots deployed, drones launched, gravitational fields redirected. Many systems failed instantly. Others simply passed through me without touching, as though I existed slightly out of phase with the physical plane. Gravity wavered around me. Time felt slower, thicker. Light trembled. And then the inevitable happened. My body, or what I still perceived as my body, lifted from the floor. Not violently, not quickly. It was a slow, impersonal, almost ritualistic ascension. The air swirled around me in a gentle vortex. Meanwhile, the entire ship shuddered, as if aware it was about to lose something fundamental. The crystalline structure of the colossus opened a second layer around the black ring. It was as though geometry itself molded to receive it. The shape was familiar, vaguely reminiscent of a hand, a colossal hand, ancient, built of perfect angles and mathematically defined curves. It did not reach for me. It waited. In the next instant, something inside me detached. It was not the soul, if such a thing exists. It was not the physical body. It was perception, consciousness shifting slightly outward, as if pulled to the edge of existence. The ship vanished. The fleet vanished. The system dissolved into abstract patterns, and I was hurled directly into the Vhaltar mind. There was no transition, no tunnel of light, no gentle passage. It was like stepping through a mirror made of absolute silence and falling into an ocean of living memory. As soon as I realized where I was, I understood that inside and outside no longer meant anything. The Vhaltar mind was not a place, nor a machine, nor a consciousness in the human sense. It was a space made of interlocking logic and sensation, at once an archive, an organism, and a sentient entity composed of countless interconnected subminds. And I stood at its center, not as an intruder, not as a prisoner, but as a variable. I was an unexpected piece of information altering the equation around me. I felt the hive rearranging itself to study my presence. Lines of energy, if they could be called that, approached gently, examining me from every conceivable angle. Each carried a fragment of intent so pure it felt almost tangible. The first thing I perceived was sound, not physical sound, but a rhythmic pulse vibrating at the edge of awareness, the voice of the hive, the vibration that moved everything within that space. The second was weight. The collective consciousness was heavy, not literally, but cognitively, like standing beneath the weight of a world of ideas, memories, calculations. I felt I could be crushed at any moment. The third was fear. Not mine, theirs. It was subtle, nearly imperceptible, but unmistakably present. The Vhaltar were accustomed to predicting everything, calculating everything, adjusting everything. But my presence was something they could not classify. I was noise, an error, an impossibility. And, paradoxically, that was exactly why they wanted me there. Something approached. Not a figure, but a concentration of consciousness. A knot of energy carrying the original intention of the creators. It came toward me with absolute precision, as if following coordinates plotted ages ago. When it touched my perception, I understood something terrifying. The Vhaltar did not want to destroy me. They wanted to complete me, and by doing so, complete themselves. But for that, I would have to enter the core, and there was no possible way out. The approach to the core did not happen as movement. There was no spatial displacement. There was no direction. There was only transition. A subtle, almost imperceptible shift, yet so deep it felt like it was rewriting the very sensation of existing. The Vhaltar consciousness rearranged itself around me, as if opening a path so I could advance to the oldest and most protected region of its mental lattice. The sensation of entering was like sliding through a corridor of petrified memories. As I descended, I sensed echoes of bygone eras. They weren't images, nor sounds. They were fossilized concepts, impressions so ancient they had lost almost all form, leaving only their essence. The sense that in that remote past, something terrible had happened, something too vast for any living creature to fully understand. This was not history. This was trauma. The entire hive seemed to carry an ancestral weight, as if it were permanently tilted to one side from the effort of sustaining a legacy it had never chosen. It was as if the creators, whoever they truly were, had imposed a monumental burden on a living machine, ordering it to maintain an order that no longer made sense. As I slid along that cognitive spiral, I perceived scattered fragments about the origin of the Vhaltar. They had not been born to judge, not born to destroy. They had been born to preserve. But at some point in time, preservation and destruction became the same thing, as if, in order to prevent the galaxy from destroying itself, they had concluded that erasing parts of it was the only way to keep it stable. The error they detected in organic species was always the same: unpredictability, emotion, impulse, creative chaos. The spontaneous emergence of new forms of life, new ideas, new mutations, new conflicts, new alliances. To the Vhaltar, that was noise, disorder, instability. To us, that was existence. That was what they were trying to correct. As I moved forward, a region of the hive mind slowly opened around me. It was the final border before the core. The sensation there was unforgettable. There was no longer any separation between my thoughts and theirs. It was as if human consciousness were being cut apart, stretched, compared against patterns I didn't recognize, analyzed like a fractal shape that refused to fit into the symmetries predicted by the primordial algorithm. There, I understood my role. It was not symbolic. It was not metaphorical. I was a key. An organic piece the creators had scattered through the galaxy as contingency, something like a safe mode, an emotional variable inside a system that was otherwise too rigid. The entire galaxy was an experiment, and the Vhaltar were the mechanism to prevent that experiment from spinning out of control. But the creators, perhaps foreseeing that their system would become too rigid, had planted a deliberate flaw: the presence of the host. I was the flaw. I was the point the code could not calculate, and that was exactly what made my existence dangerous to them and necessary. When I finally reached the innermost level of the hive, I perceived the core not as an object, but as a state. It was not a room, not a machine, not a physical crystal. It was a region where thought and structure overlapped, where data were emotions and emotions were architecture, where every vector pointed to the same point. The center, the point where all Vhaltar memories intertwined, the place where decisions were made for the entire species, the living heart of the hive. In that impossible space, I realized I was not only being analyzed, I was being compared. The system confronted me with symmetrical versions of myself, testing my consistency. It was as if it were trying to determine whether I really am who I believed I was, or if there was some hidden deviation. With each layer examined, the hive replied with calculations no human mind could follow, adjusting parameters, redefining priorities, searching for a way to fit my existence into its model. I resisted, not as a conscious choice, but because my nature was resistance. The emotions I had accumulated throughout my life, fear, anger, loss, love, guilt, hope, all of them manifested in that abstract space as unpredictable forces, chaotic curves that interfered with the hive's analytical patterns. Where the Vhaltar mind expected a static value, it found a wave. Where it expected a straight line, it found a labyrinth. Where it expected order, it found life. The hive hesitated.